Hi, I'm John Nerrell, and welcome to the Mid-Career GPS podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your career and overwhelmed by what steps to take, I can help you. As an executive and career transition coach, I help my clients prepare, position, and promote who they are and what they do to show up and find a job they love or love the job they have. It's time to start building your mid-career GPS. So let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I want you to imagine that you've got the job, you've got the success, and you still want to do something different. Now, we've talked before on this podcast that navigating career transitions are a natural part of your mid-career journey. And this podcast is going to continue to highlight those things, but we're also going to talk to people who have learned some valuable life and career lessons and want to share them with you to help you along your journey. Now, today I'm excited to bring back someone to my podcast. She was a guest on Show Up 2020, and I'm looking forward to an updated and current conversation with her today. I want you to meet Jessi Shuraleff. She's the former head of industry at Google and the founder and host of the This Is My Truth podcast. Today, she's going to share with us how she's taking her mid-career GPS and programming it to guide her into a new and exciting direction. Please welcome Jessi Shuraleff to the podcast. Hi, Jessi.
Hi, John. I'm so excited to be back. Thank you for having me.
Same here. You know, what's been great since we talked, you were episode 14 out of like 30 or 31. So we kind of got like right in the middle of Show Up 2020. And what's been great is that you and I have continued to keep in touch, both on social media and just checking in by email and things like that. And so when I heard about all the stuff that was going on with you professionally, it just seemed you were a perfect guest to welcome back to the podcast. And I'm excited to talk to you today.
Same here.
Yeah. So you had the job. You worked for Google, and would love for you just to tell our listeners what, you know, quickly and kind of a sum up kind of thing, but what was your 13 and a half years like at Google?
Yeah. So I was at Google for 13 and a half years. And, you know, sometimes I still have to pinch myself that was my life. And, you know, I want to start the conversation just giving you a bit of context on me and my life. And I think it'll help to set the stage for the decisions that I've made throughout my career journey.
Sure.
So I am someone who I grew up in an upper middle class town on Long Island. It was a town that like everybody knew everybody's business, and I desperately wanted to get out. And so I went to school in Boston, and it was my first time where I, sort of left the nest. But the expectation, right, was that I would graduate from high school, I would get into hopefully a good college, and then get a good job. And I followed that sort of expectation, that ladder that was like set out for me to a T. And I got the job at Google at a time in 2007 when they had just been announced for the first time that they were the best company to work for. And it just fell into step. And, for me, I would never have stayed for 13 and a half years if I didn't love the company, if I didn't love and feel like I was learning. And it wasn't like I had the same role for that 13 and a half years. I didn't know actually what I was going to do when I signed the contract, but when I started, I was literally answering phone calls. So anyone who called Google, I would talk to them. And and it was just, I was like, okay. And I'd gone to school for organizational communication, which I like to say was basically a business degree without having to take accounting and finance classes. And I wasn't necessarily sure what I wanted to do. And, Google was the right next step at that time. And so I started out answering phone calls. I very quickly was able to pivot into a sales role. And I've done pretty much every sales role that you could do at Google, with most recently the last 5 years spent managing a fairly large sales team focused on our video and non-search products. And, I've had the privilege of working with some of the largest global brands in the world, and also some of the small mom and pop shops. And I have learned so much from them. And I'm happy to dive into like any part of Google and sort of those decisions, but it's been a whirlwind, and also, what felt like a very linear path where it was like at Google, you start in one job, you go to the next job, you go to the next job. And so the reason why I started the conversation of like sort of setting the expectation is like, I did that at Google too. Like I went to the next path. I like chased the next promotion. And that was my time there for 13 and a half years.
And what I love about that is that it doesn't have to be Google where you're first starting out in your career and you decide to grow some roots. You see that there are opportunities and advancements that can happen. And like most young professionals, not only do you get super curious, but you also get to be like a sponge. You take everything in and try to figure out what's going to be next. So during your time there at Google, what would you say were some of the biggest lessons you learned that really helped to elevate who you are as a professional?
I love that question. And I think that, just to reiterate, like the time that I spent at Google, I guess I'm technically a millennial. I don't like, I'm on like the cusp, dependent on like how you define it. And most people of that generation are not known to stay at a company for as long as they did. And, numerous friends of mine were like, why are you staying? Like, jump around, like go to a startup. And for me, as I look back on my career, every time I got that itch, and it happened to me like every 2 years, where it was like, okay, I don't know if I'm learning a ton anymore, like what's next? And I debated if I wanted to go to, business school, or if I wanted to, join a startup, or what was that next step for me. I was always able to find it within Google. And so, I considered myself really fortunate where I was able to sort of get those, scratch those itches, if you will, all within the company that I felt so proud of. And, I felt like it could continue to advance my career. So I bring that up because one of the lessons that I learned was your career is, someone said this to me once, it's like your career is a jungle gym. It's not a ladder. And it really stuck with me because, for those listening who might be in a more traditional working environment, corporate working environment, or even those who are in the technology industry, it seems like your career is supposed to follow this ladder. And, when I started at Google was very small compared to how it is now. And it was really quick. Like I advanced very quickly. And so this expectation of like, what's next was set very early from a cultural perspective. But it got to a point where, people weren't advancing as quickly. Like we couldn't, there wasn't as many roles available. And so I started to think, okay, like if what's next isn't necessarily that next rung on the ladder, what are the skills that I want to gain? What are the industries that I find interesting? And what does that look like? And so, a move that I made probably mid-career, it was maybe about 6 or 7 years into Google. And I took a horizontal role. It was an account executive role on a different business, but it was at a point in my life where I had been contemplating leaving Google. I was debating going to a startup, and we had just acquired a company called Invite Media at the time. And I got recruited through colleagues to apply for this job. I applied for it. I got offered it. And the amount of directors, mentors, people within the company that told me it's a bad move, don't make a horizontal move, was, I could count them on like two hands how many people told me not to make that move. But it was one of the best career decisions I ever made, because that company we acquired was at the cutting edge of an industry within this space that no one else understood. And I got like an inside look of basically being within a startup, within the comfort of Google, which I realized I hated. And I got to learn a skill set that no one else within the sales organization that I had left had. And so ultimately, when my time was up within that role, that horizontal account executive role that I took, I was easily able to go back into the sales org that I had been in. And I was a hot commodity. Like, I had a skill set that nobody else out of hundreds of people had. And it actually accelerated my career in ways that I never would have been able to do if I had just sort of went on the like quote unquote traditional corporate ladder and chased that next promotion.
There's so many good things there in what you shared. And first of all, I am one who says that my career path has been a mess. So when I heard you say jungle gym, I was like, I really like that. I may borrow that actually.
Go right
But
ahead.
I'll
It's
give you
not mine.
credit. But there really is such value in taking a horizontal move, which allows you to level up skill wise when you see the potential for where that's going to get you. That to me seems like such a bold move for you, especially given what you've initially described to us as this culture of always being upwardly mobile.
Yeah, I mean, it was hands down one of the best decisions that I ever made. And like I said, I had numerous people telling me not to make it, and I share that because I'm not a person who knows in the back of my head that like I've always wanted to be a CEO of a Fortune 50 company,
Mhm.
or I've never had that sort of like North Star in my career. The way that I operate my life, which drives my husband insane, let's be honest, is I try something and I like assess for myself, like, what do I like? What do I not like? And so then I chase more of what I like and get rid of what I don't like. And I share that because when I thought about, the roles that I took at Google, and thinking about this conversation, that was my guiding principle. It was sort of like, what are the skills that I want to gain? Am I going to gain them here? And what does that look like? And does it have more of what I want or more of what I don't want? And so that's ultimately sort of the barometer that I use when making decisions when it comes to my career, which, you know, might be different from how others make their decision. I think that's totally fair, but I share that because, it's allowed me to make decisions where other people like scratch their heads, but it feels right to me. And it ultimately, knock on wood, has always seemed to pay off in
Right.
some form.
Right. And in that, when you were considering taking this horizontal move, you had mentioned that you were somewhere around the 6 to 7 year mark at Google and thinking you wanted something more, and this opportunity comes along, which is a lot of great insight there, because you can be in a company and still feel that need to be stretched, to be pulled, to grow, and to do something else. But now double the time frame to now years like 11, 12, 13 and a half. And let us in a little bit about, when did you actually start to question that there was something more for you to do professionally outside of Google?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for me, I'll be really honest. I probably started to get the itch to maybe explore what was outside of Google after the birth of my second daughter. So that would be around, let's see, she turns 3 in 2 weeks. So about 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
And, I took pride, I still do, as a working mom, and nothing against stay-at-home moms. I'm one right now, but I have 2 young daughters, and I wanted to be able to show them what it meant to be a working parent. But at the same time, what I realized was I wanted them to also know that it wasn't just being a working parent that I cared about. It was being a working parent and doing something that felt like it had impact and that you were making an impact both on yourself and beyond. And like I said, Google is an amazing company. I've also seen the company grow. And there were just moments where I was starting to get that whisper of not this. And I'll be the first to admit, I'm not very good at listening. When people say like, listen to your inner voice, I'm one to roll my eyes. But I'm getting better at that, and I'm working on that. And so there would be moments where I'd be sitting in a meeting and it would be the same conversation that we had like 6 years before or 5 years before or two, right? Like we've all been in those meetings where we're like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe we haven't made this decision. Or I'd be in a meeting and someone would bring up an idea that literally like we had done in 2007. And so it was just this little whisper of like, not this, not this, not this. And then there would be other situations, like bigger situations where I would, let's use COVID for example. I was, Google is an amazing company. They created a special leave specifically for COVID for working parents and caregivers. And I was able to take advantage of that. And I was supposed to be working part-time. And for most people who have attempted to do this, it's never part-time, unfortunately. So, we were in the middle of 2021 planning. We were in the middle of Google's annual performance review. I managed a team of 10 and, trying to get everyone's schedules while I'm trying to work part-time. It didn't work. I had 3 stakeholders, at the director level, in addition to my own director that my team was managing. And so I was in this meeting, that my team was leading. And I was also dealing with my 2.5-year-old who was in a car screaming. And John, you've met my 2.5-year-old. She is quite the screamer.
And she's adorable, but yes,
she is adorable, but she is a screamer, because she had to go to the bathroom and I didn't have a bathroom for her. Like we were picking my other daughter up from school. And so here I am like negotiating this like conference call that's really important with key internal stakeholders. I'm negotiating with my 2.5-year-old to like pee in a Whole Foods reusable bag because it was the only thing that I had in my car. And I like that not this was no longer a whisper. It was a shout. And I was like, what am I doing? And so I had to be really honest with myself, which was hard, like very, very hard.
Yeah.
And just sit with myself and sort of say, okay, like what are my priorities? What do I really want to do? And where am I getting energy? And almost a year ago, I had started my podcast and, I loved connecting with amazing humans and hearing their stories. And so I was like, okay, that's an easy check. Like I love doing that. I love spending time with my girls. They're almost 3 and almost 5. Like they're at such a fun age. And then I thought about my job and like, while there were definitely parts of my job, especially the people management part that like were giving me energy, the job as a whole no longer was. And so I had to have really hard conversations. And it wasn't just one, right? It was like numerous conversations with both myself and my husband about, what does that path look like? Because candidly, I was on a fast track to director. Like I could literally tell you what my career at Google would have been over the next 2, 5, 7, 10 years. And, I'm so grateful for the champions and the stakeholders and the mentors that I had that had put me on that path. But when I looked around at the people in those roles, I didn't want what they had. And again, it was really hard. It was a hard reality. But ultimately, I made the decision that I wanted to pursue the things that were bringing me joy. And, I had my husband and I, like I said, it was not just one conversation. It wasn't always just conversations. Like they were arguments sometimes.
Sure.
And I just remember saying to him, I don't need you to trust me because I know that whatever I put my mind to, I will be successful at, but I do need your support. And so I share that for anyone who's ever made like a pivot or thinking about making a pivot in their life or their career, because for me, it was getting really clear on what I wanted and what I didn't want. And then making sure I had the support system I needed in order to be successful to do that.
Having that support system there is everything. Right. It's that knowing that person has got your back, that it might freak them out in terms of what you're doing, or it may not align with what they necessarily might do for their career, but they still trust that you got it. And they're willing to be that support for you in any way, shape, or form. And I loved how you walked us through so beautifully about how that whisper became a shout. Because so oftentimes we get these, whether we call them mid-career moments or those ahas, or it's the brick upside the head, whatever those things are, right? That really make us go, wow, there's something really going on here. So when you make the decision to leave, what was the last week of work like for you?
Well, I'll be honest. I have had and have an amazing support system within Google.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very fortunate that my direct manager, my director, was someone that I'd known for the last 11 years. She I would consider her a friend and same. And so I actually brought her the idea that I was thinking about leaving Google months before.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was a risk. I was
Sure.
not sure if she was going to tell me I needed to leave tomorrow or what. And, again, I'm so grateful. She was an amazing sounding board. She helped me think through my options. They countered different options to try to keep me. And I'm so grateful for that. But ultimately, I made the decision. And I would say the last week of work, one was weird because of COVID. Like this entire leap has been a little weird because of COVID. I used to travel 3 out of the 4 weeks a month, and within those being several cities each week, and all of that stopped. And so I will say what my last week it felt surreal. Like it was sad. It was exciting. It was terrifying, exciting, like so many conversations that, after 13 and a half years, your network is huge, both with clients, but also with Googlers. And what was really, really interesting to me was that the conversations I had, the 3 most common responses I got from other Googlers was, you're so brave. I wish I could do this, but, and, you're an inspiration. Like you're someone that I look up to. And it was just really interesting to me because I think so many of us are, contemplating different moves. And, the theme, we've talked about this, John, you and I, a little bit, like the theme for me for 2021 is F the handcuffs. And handcuffs being so many different things, right? Like limiting beliefs, labels we consciously or unconsciously put on each other. But, the most pressing one, given my decision, was the golden handcuffs, because, I was paid really well for what I did. And for those of you listening who are not familiar with what golden handcuffs are, it's, financial incentives that companies give to employees to keep them there. And, it's real. It's like a legitimate thing. And
Absolutely.
I share sort of that my process took a few years because it also took, my husband and I several years to get on the same page, like emotionally, but also financially to be able to make this leap. And, I think those are all important things that we had to consider for our own journey. Um, and what other, when I was talking to other Googlers, like what they were like relaying back to me in terms of, reasons why they aren't able to make moves that they want to make.
Absolutely. And we think about those influencers that impact or affect us in terms of leaving a job, right? You could have the worst boss, and that decision might be pretty easy and be like, I'm going to go ahead and work somewhere else. But when you like the company, you like the work, you like the people you're working with, you like the clients you have, and you're being paid well for it and rightfully so, those decisions to decide, I'm ready to go and do something else, or as you said, to kind of F the handcuffs, right, is not an easy decision. So I'm sure there are people that are listening and going, yes, that is brave. Or how do I see myself kind of being in that position to go ahead and do that? But now that you've made that decision and you're a few months away from it, what's life and work like now for you?
Yeah, I mean, there were things that I knew I was going to miss. Like Google is a company where you get constant feedback and you get constant validation. And when you make this leap into entrepreneurship or solopreneurship or whatever that, for me, I often joke that this is my gap year and I'm like following what feels good and we'll see what happens.
Yep.
So I knew that, like, I was like, I'm going to miss that. So how do I create pockets of, what I need in order to still feel like I am able to drive myself forward? And so I also knew that like I would miss like the sounding board aspect of like being at Google. So I created my own, like I would find communities of people, where I can create sounding boards where I can say like, hey, let's get on like a productivity co-working session or, I need some accountability. Like I need to get this done. Could you check in with me? Like simple things, but I knew what I needed in order to sort of be quote unquote successful in this like leap that I'm taking. And so I made my own version of that, if you will, which has been really, really interesting. And, I will say, as I made the leap and sort of like announced to people outside of like my core group that I was leaving, like I've had opportunities come to me. I've had people reach out and sort of say like, hey, like, are you interested in talking to this company? And it's been just like I had a conversation with a friend last night and I was like, I'm just open. Like I'm not shutting any doors. I'm not closing any windows. I'm seeing what is coming and I'm assessing sort of what feels good and what feels right. And one of the big things is I love, creating space for people to share their stories. I think that there is a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs to use storytelling to effectively grow their engagement with their audience. And so it's things like that where I'm leaning into and just seeing what happens.
What a great opportunity in that. I loved how you phrased it was kind of a gap year, right? A gap year for you to kind of see what feels right or feels good for you professionally in order to be able to explore that. I think when people are able to do that, one of the biggest things I personally believe that people often miss in the career transition piece is they don't take that time to breathe in between pivots. Even if it's just going to a new company to do a similar role, having that week or two off in between is so cleansing for the mind and the spirit. and the self to just make that kind of break. And obviously sometimes financial situations are not what they are, and so you leave a job on Friday and start a new one on Monday, and that's what you need to do. There's no judgment in that, right? But if you do have that chance to just kind of decompress and take that breath and do some things that are really important and necessary for you, what a great period in time in your life to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, like I fully own that there's a lot of privilege in what I've been able to do. And not everybody, is able to make the choices. There's, plenty of articles out there talking about how women are being forced to make these choices
Right.
that they don't want to make. And so, I'm not going to sit here and say that everyone can do this. And I want to own the fact that there's a lot of privilege in what I've been able to do. And I'm very grateful for that. And I think because of that, the more that I can help make an impact in others' lives, the more I can pay it forward. To all those who have, helped me throughout my journey and my career and just my life. Because, I've never really believed in work-life balance. Like, I don't actually think that's a thing.
Mhm.
Definitely is not a thing in COVID.
No, not at all.
So,
No.
and so, I think that is important to call out. Like, I fully own that there's a lot of privilege in what I've been able to do. But I also know if that I hadn't done it, I would have been vastly unhappy. I would have not been the mom, the human, the partner, the family member that I would have wanted to be. And I know that because I spent, probably the last 2 years of my life, like in that position. And it took time, but, when I was ready and able to make that leap, I'm only like a few weeks in. So like, I can't say like for sure, but it's been just like, frankly, John, like the pressure of not having to check my email and get pings from people on Google Hangouts like 24/7, like that pressure alone just being lifted has been a huge weight off my shoulders.
Nice. Nice. So, Jessi, as we wrap up here, what advice would you give someone who is navigating their mid-career journey and helping them build their professional GPS to get them where they want to be?
I love that. So someone gave me this advice early on in my career, and it really stuck with me, that when people reach out to you, like recruiters or other companies, even if you're not ready to make a move, it's worth an exploratory conversation. And the way that I always thought about it was, in Google, we lived in our own bubble. Like, people don't understand my title. They're like a head of industry. Like, what the heck is that? And I was like, well, like, let me sit here and try to explain it to you for 5 minutes. Right. And so and I think that's true in a lot of industries, right? Like, everyone in finance is a VP. It's like, okay, like, but like, what is that really? And so, for me, that has always been really helpful, because when I was ready to think about like, what is my next move? Like, what are the skills that I want to gain? Like I said earlier, I was always able to find that within Google, but it was always helpful to have those external conversations so that I could be like gut checking, you know, are my skills marketable elsewhere? Like, if I wanted to make a move into management and I didn't want to do it at Google, like, what are the skills that I would need to gain in order to like effectively make that jump outside of Google? And like, how do I bridge that gap? And so that's advice that has always stuck with me. It's advice that I gave my team. Like, I'm not like sitting there saying like, I want you to leave, but I think that like, if someone is coming to knock on your door, it's worth an exploratory conversation. It helps to broaden your network. And, it was advice that like really, really helped me as I was navigating my career, even though I decided for 13 and a half years to stay at Google.
Well, and I love that, because as we broaden our network and we do that very intentionally, one person at a time, we go into those conversations with hopefully not being focused on the outcome. If we just focus on building that connection, we never know where that connection is going to go or how that connection will come back to you down the road, whether it be someone who reaches out to you and says, hey, could you help me with this? Or, hey, I think I may have an opportunity for you. All because of maybe that 15 or 20 minutes you spent with someone truly engrossed in the opportunity to connect without being focused on what am I going to get out of this or what are you going to do for me?
Yes.
Just that opportunity to build your network, like you mentioned.
Yeah, 100%. And I will be honest, since taking the leap, I've realized how much I probably neglected my network in some ways, but it's so easy to pick back up again. Like
Yes.
the amount of exploratory conversations or the amount of people reaching out to me. I literally had a girlfriend call me who was a former coworker who I hadn't talked to. She left Google in 2016 and I didn't even know. And so I hadn't even talked to her in years, but she texted me and we ended up having a 30-minute conversation and just catching up on life and, what that experience was like for her. And so, for someone who might be listening and is like, oh my gosh, I don't have a network or I've neglected my network. For me, my experience, because I probably did neglect my network at some point, was it's so easy to pick back up again. It's probably worse in your head than what the actual reality of going through that process will look like for you.
Without question. And to piggyback on that, when we are loving what we're doing or we're not loving what we're doing, but we are employed, it can be very easy to not spend that kind of time in your network because your circle is very close. Mm-hmm. And that's a common experience we all have. And we also have that common experience of saying, I need to re-engage my network. I need to reconnect with my network. And so those are all things that are really understandable, especially more so because of COVID and what we've seen in 2020 and now 2021.
100%. 100%.
So Jessi, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Our conversations always seem to fly by and everything, but please let my listeners know where they can find you and how they can connect with you.
Awesome. So you can find me at my podcast, This Is My Truth, which is available on all major podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, basically wherever you listen to a podcast. And you can also reach me on my website at www.jessishuraleff, that's JESSISHURALEFF.com. It's a mouthful. I should have kept my maiden name. And on Instagram at This Is My Truth Podcast. And, like I said, I don't necessarily have a North Star of what this next year is going to look like, but I have a few different things percolating. And if anything that I've talked through, or you just want to connect because opening your network to other people is a gift, I would love to connect with anyone in your audience.
Well, absolutely. And I will make sure all of that stuff is in the show notes. Definitely. Please check out Jessi's podcast. The conversations you have had have just been eye-opening and wonderful. I am grateful to have been a guest as well and spend some time with you there. We'll link that up in the show notes if people want to listen to that as well. But what you are doing and in using this time, both personally and professionally, I thank you so much for sharing that with me and everybody listening today. It was just great getting to know a little bit more about your struggle and your journey and your achievements and just being open to whatever is next. So thank you so very, very much, my friend.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, and I'll be back with another interview and episode really, really soon. Take care and make it a great day. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you usually listen. If you haven't already, I'd appreciate it if you would leave me a rating and review to let me know what you think, to help others find this podcast and continue to bring you relevant and useful content to help you navigate what's next for your career. And if you're ready to create your mid-career GPS and get rid of the overwhelm so you can find the job you'll love or love the job you have, visit my website at johnneral.com for more information about joining my private Facebook group, and scheduling a free consult with me so we can start building your mid-career GPS together. Don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn and follow me on social at John Narrow Coaching. I'll see you next time.